Good afternoon, everybody. Happy Sunday. Welcome to the Insurance Pilot, where we're sort of rebooting our weekly video series on Facebook here, where we're going to transition a little bit from Hurricane Michael toward moving forward and looking at the things that we need to look at as we move down the road. We're going to try to keep this a little bit shorter, and I'm going to talk to you today about how you can become an expert insurance consumer in 5 to 10 minutes a week, and that's by watching us on Sundays, either live or recorded. Either one will be fine. Today I want to talk to you about 5 keys to your homeowner's policy. There's no way that I think most people can absorb all of the language in their insurance policy. Now, some of you have taken my advice since Hurricane Michael and actually read your policy. I think that's excellent for those of you that have. However, just because you read it doesn't necessarily mean you understand it all. And I'm not going to tell you that what I'm going to say today is going to cover everything that you need to know, but these 5 keys I think will help keep you out of trouble next time we have a hurricane. Now, first thing you got to worry about is coverage A, your dwelling. Everybody knows what that is. It talks about the building itself. Be sure you have enough coverage. That's number one. There's a lot of people that try to skimp and say want to have 200,000 when they really should have 215, something like that. And I can tell you that the price tag is very, very modest when you're looking at small limits like that. And if you need to balance that out somehow, I'm going to get to that in just a minute. But don't skimp. You need to make sure you remember that this is not based on market value or what it costs you to buy that home. If you bought a home for, say, $100,000 or $125,000, you fix it up. Now to rebuild that same home after a hurricane, maybe $250,000 or $275,000, and that's the number you need to be worried about. Remember, land value is not something you need to worry about. Market value, again, is not something we're concerned with. Remember that costs go up after a storm, and so while you think $125 or $150 a square foot might be a reasonable number, after a hurricane, I think we all know that that went away. Roofing costs soared. The cost of water mitigation and things such as that became a real problem. So you need to build those kind of costs in and look back at your experience in Hurricane Michael, or if you had some good luck and didn't have to wrestle with all this, look at your neighbors and see how they fared. Don't skimp. Again, if you want to skimp, what I would tell you is I think you need to skimp on the low end. Don't skimp on your limit. Get as much as you feel like you need, and if you want to skimp on the first part. Skip on your deductible. Buy a higher deductible, and we're going to get to that in a minute. But if you need to balance out some cost savings, we'll tell you how to do that in just a second. The second thing, and where I saw people I think get in more trouble than anywhere else, is on coverage B, your other structures. You need to look at the specific parts of your policy that deal with this, because there's some funky exclusions that some insurance companies have. First of all, coverage B usually is 10% of your coverage A amount. But some insurance companies, in order to save you money, and some agents would quote you at 2% instead of 10%. That's a huge difference. Let's say you have a $200,000 home. Well, do you want $20,000 in coverage, or do you want $4,000 in coverage for your other structures? That includes sheds, detached garages, fences, could be your pool cage perhaps, depending on things. But you need to consider your pool enclosure. If you have a large screen enclosure, you need to make sure that there's an endorsement for that on your policy, that it is included. Look your agent in the eye and have him assure you and put in writing to you that it is covered. Now, most of the time, those pool cages are going to be covered for the aluminum framing, but you may have difficulty getting an insurance company that will cover the screen itself. You may just have to realize that the screening is going to be essentially another deductible, so choose your hurricane deductible accordingly if you feel like you're going to have to replace all the screen in your screen porch. Look at your sheds and garages, detached buildings. There are some insurance companies that say that for a hurricane they will not cover these buildings unless they're substantially the same construction as your home. What this is intended to do is to not cover those very flimsy metal garages, storage, where you put your lawnmower kind of thing. However, that sort of thing has been expanded considerably, and there are some pretty substantial buildings that were not covered in this storm we're hearing about. So you want to have that discussion face-to-face with your agent as well and see if that's a problem. Your fences, you need to, there's been a lot of questions about whether it's coverage A or coverage B. In some cases it doesn't matter, because there have been specific exclusions in some cases for your fence due to hurricane exposure or hurricane loss. So have that discussion as well and make sure that you have some assurance there. A little bit about docks and seawalls. Docks and seawalls, I can tell you, you're not ever going to be happy with the coverage unless you get extremely lucky. Most of the damage to docks and seawalls is usually going to be done by water. You're going to have wave action and things like that in a storm that damage it. That's always excluded. That would be the purview of flood insurance, and federal flood insurance policies always, always, always exclude docks, piers, seawalls, anything over the water, because it's so highly damageable. So frankly, that's another thing you need to build into your calculation when you're trying to figure out what deductible you want to have. I do want to say something about these outbuildings, though. If you have, say, a substantial outbuilding that is rented, perhaps via Airbnb, or perhaps it is a workshop that you use in your business, something such as that, you need to think about that too, because that also could give you some problems with coverage later. Again, please talk to your agent about that issue. I want to talk to you a little bit about contents as well. Contents is something that I know can be a real headache after a hurricane, because while an adjuster or a contractor can come in and tell you what it costs to rebuild your home, they can't tell you what it's going to take to put the stuff back in your home, because they don't know what you have until you tell them. So we know this is a headache, so we've talked about pictures and some of that kind of thing, but with regard to your policy and with regard to your coverage, generally speaking, what's going to happen is your coverage will either be 50% or 70% of your coverage A dwelling amount. So if that's not enough, again, talk to your agent and see if you can buy some more coverage. The important thing I want to tell you, though, is what you need to do is make sure that there is replacement cost coverage on your contents. You do not want this at actual cash value, or they're basically going to pay you the yard sale equivalent for your contents, and you don't want that. You want to go out after a hurricane and be able to buy new furniture to put in your home. Very, very important to have replacement cost, not just on your home, not just on the dwelling, but on your contents as well. Very, very important. Moving away from your property coverage just a little bit, what you need to look at, and nobody looked at after the storm, I want you to look at your liability coverage. It's going to be under coverage D&E, is your medical payments and your liability coverage. But what you want to tell your agent is you want to buy the highest limit that they will sell you. A lot of folks end up with $100,000 as a liability limit, and I can tell you, if there is a significant accident and someone's seriously hurt, $100,000 just does not go very far in the hospital anymore. You've got to pay emergency room charges, you'd have to pay whatever the medical bills are, lost wages, and oh my God, the attorneys that are going to be on this thing, and those are very expensive. So what you want to do is you want to buy the highest limit that's available, because it's very, very inexpensive. To go from $100,000 to $300,000 or $500,000 is probably going to cost you $25, $30, $40 a year. Very, very modest cost for very, very good coverage. We're going to talk in future episodes about liability umbrellas and things such as that, but what I'll tell you now is on your homeowner's policy, buy the highest limit that you can buy. Finally, I want to end us today with deductibles. And you need to decide what your objective is after a hurricane, or after any claim for that matter. I've talked about some things, and you've all learned some things that are not covered by your insurance policy. You need to build those in as costs you can cover in addition to your deductible. What I would suggest to you is, if you just want to save money, rather than reducing your amount of coverage, increase your deductible and see what that does. Ask your agent to provide you 2 or 3 or 4 options and see what that would work. See what the savings would be at various levels. What I would tell you today is, generally speaking, what we are finding right now is if your insurance company will let you buy down to a flat wind or hurricane deductible, that tends to be worth the money. Not always, but what you should do is ask your insurance company, ask your agent, if you can find coverage with a flat deductible, say at $1,000 or $500 for hurricane damage. Let's say that costs you another $100 to go to a $1,000 deductible down from a 2% deductible, which could be $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000. Probably worth your money there. Now, if it's very, very expensive, you may not want to do that. On the other side, you will have an AOP, or what they call all other perils deductible. This is the deductible that applies to anything except wind or hurricane. And what I would encourage you to do there is to raise that deductible, particularly if it's going to save you substantially. If it's going to save you just a few bucks, then maybe you don't want to do it. But going from $500 to $1,000 or even $2,500 can save you a substantial amount of money. And what I would suggest you do is call your agent, tell him what you're thinking, and ask them to give you those options and what the premium differences would be. that's all we're going to cover today. I'm not sure what we're going to do next week, but thanks to those of you that have watched Eating the Elephant and that have joined us today here on the pilot. We'll see you next Sunday at the usual time. Thanks.